Welcome to Gino's Spot, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, it's not night time for me because it is morning. Beautiful mist coming across the valley. And this Tuesday, we are starting our new run of our show, Center Stage's 25-year anniversary. It is the songs that rocked our world, and we call it the Super Lekker Summer Tour. We are going to be starting tonight, Tuesday, as we speak. There are still a few tickets left at this point in time, but Friday night is completely sold out. So make sure you get your tickets. We're on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week, and then we head off to East London a little bit later in November. However, Gino's Spot tonight is something that you can have a look at. You can sit down on your couch, get yourself a little drink, a little Fitch and Leeds or something, a little gin and tonic, and relax and watch Div de Villiers with Dean Allen, which is a fascinating interview we had on Thursday night. So please enjoy. If you're needing tickets for the show, get hold of Wendy Tompkins Thompson. She's on the feed tonight as well. So just pop your name in there if you need to, and tag Wendy if you need some tickets. Otherwise, give her a call or visit www.centerstage.co.za. Also, the sponsors, thank you very much to the sponsors. Spa, who've been supporting us throughout, and then of course Fitch and Leeds and Sovereign, who are supporting the show this week as well. So very exciting show, brand new show, first one in 2.5 years. Songs that rocked our world. But for our Gino Spot viewers, tonight we have a special show. Last Thursday we had Div de Villiers, the giant eco warrior. We've got him in studio with Dean Allen, and Dean is where they did a show on Thursday. Absolutely fascinating. So pour yourself a drink, get ready. Thank you to Amobia for our internet. Thank you to Spa, and thank you to Fitch and Leeds, as well as Fat Cats for our catering. See you at the show.
Let's get this show on the road. I'm going to bring on none other than Div de Villiers. Cheers, Div. How are you doing?
Hey, cheers. Thank you, Dean. Nice to be here, and really honoured to be the first guest of Frontierland.
You are. It's making a debut. I mean, you're making a debut, of course, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Div to do that. But you're probably wondering why we've built this show, The Big Protector. So let's get that out of the way. Just to stand here, give us a show of your great stature. Now have a look at this. There's not many people I look up to in the world, but what are you, 6'5"?
6'5", yeah, 6'5", still growing.
Well, you've got a while to go. You're a bit of a tiddler, obviously, there. 6'5" and size 15 shoes, I believe.
Yeah, the most important part of it is, I can't even lift my leg that high, but there we go. Size 15s.
As we're going to find out, you are obviously involved in law enforcement and things like that. I mean, it's a wonder why we've got any problem with law enforcement in this part of the country, because if I saw you coming, I'd certainly run the other way. Now, we've had a wonderful day today together. We spent our time chatting, getting to know each other, and I'm looking forward to this. And I think you're in for a treat, ladies and gentlemen, because this man is a raconteur of note. I mean, some of the stories, serious stories, but also very funny. And I think the work you're involved in, there has to be a sense of humour as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's serious work. Sometimes it's, you get very despondent in what you do, especially in law enforcement. So you've got to find the funny moments out of it. You've got to get that camaraderie, and fortunately we've got that in spades. We've got it in chunklers, good characters, good people of the Eastern Cape. That's why you're here. That's why you decided to settle here. And that helps, definitely helps to have a sense of humour and have characters around. Have a bit of fun as well.
I think as South Africans we've got to have a sense of humour. I mean, my perspective is always... the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side, which it isn't. And here in the Eastern Cape, I mean, we're living real lives, and you're at the frontier of what you do. Let's sort of almost go back to the beginning. I mean, you're known as the Big Protector. You're a green scorpion, which is an interesting term. We'll talk about that more. Were you always born to conserve? Was nature always part of your journey, did you think?
I think it was, I think from a very early age, certainly from a school-going age, in the just late sort of 1960s, I went to a little school in Johannesburg, in fact, in what the suburbs are now, Rissidale. But at that time, it was plots. There were large open spaces around Cresta and Rissidale and Darrenwood. And I had a headmistress by the name of Jane Fraser, little old lady, very small, purple hairdo, but she was passionate about birds and about environment. So from that early age on already, we were being exposed as scholars to what conservation is all about. We were being taken on field trips, not only to the Darrenwood Dam, we're all marching down and in our lines through to the Darrenwood Dam to go and look at the birds, but also to places like Kruger National Park, which she organised trips. I mean, that was way before her time. I don't know of any other school, certainly at that stage, and certainly in South Africa, that was punting nature conservation. So that's where the penny dropped, that's where the whole thing started. The passion was ignited, and so it just grew throughout my life. Right, as I said, I started out in law enforcement. It wasn't very long that I was in law enforcement when I was sent off in those early days to experience different facets of conservation. That was also really nice in those years, is that you could go and do fisheries management, and then you did move on to do reserve management, then you did a bit of research, then you did environmental education. I was testing professional hunters for about 5 or 6 years in my early days as a conservator, and learned a hell of a lot, because that exposes you to the hunting fraternity, and they know a lot about the bush.
Yeah.
So those were magic years. And then I went through to work in the former Transkei, as you say. I was based in Kokstad, which is just below close to the Drakensberg, and I worked there supposed to only go there for 3 years, but I worked there for 11 years.
Wow.
So my kids were pretty young, but when they were finished with their schooling, their primary schooling, they were going to have to go to a boarding school probably, and I thought it would be a good idea to spend the last few years of my kids' life with me, and I wanted to be with my kids. I love kids. And so there was a job advertised in my own department in law enforcement to basically establish a law enforcement unit, a compliance and enforcement unit. It was based in Bishu, which is our head office, which was not first prize. Bishu, I didn't want to go to Bishu, but looking at the establishing of such a unit and the potential that the contribution I could make to conservation there were very high priorities to me, and as well as the fact that my kids would be with me for another 5 years at least. So I applied for it. Now, you must understand, with affirmative action, with the whole history of the country, I didn't think I had much of a chance, my history as well. I'm open with my history. I was open right from the very first interview about the fact, that I was in the military. I was a captain in the infantry, and I was asked, I was peppered with questions by the interviewing panels. But I think the people appreciated the honesty in that as well. And I was honest again. I was honest when I went to the interviews for this post, and I got the job. So in October 2007, I moved to Bishu, and I basically established what is now known as the Green Scorpions of the Eastern Cape. So it's the enforcement unit that deals with environmental enforcement. Okay. So 15 years I've been busy with, obviously established a team, mainly ex-policemen, and pretty much we tried to get the best of the best, so that we could run with cases and we would have success. And it's been a wonderful success story. It's been a great model, and the team has been fantastic. So that's how I got into law enforcement.
And the name Green Scorpions, a lot of people watching would have heard that name. I mean, it's catchy, it's got a tag. We know of our scorpions here in South Africa, catching the bad guys. How did that name come about?
Yeah, apparently that name came about by the former minister, Martinus van Schalkwyk, being asked about the new unit that was going to enforce environmental legislation, the National Environmental Management Act, and various other specific environmental management acts that are associated with the NEMA, like the Biodiversity Act and the Protected Areas Act, Air Quality Act, all those things. So there had to be specialist investigators trained to enforce this national legislation. And they had a very long-winded name, certainly not a very sexy name. It was the department's name, and following the department's name would come the environmental management inspectors. And Van Schalkwyk was talking to a whole lot of reporters, and they wanted to know what the name of these people are. And he came up with a brainwave there that they'd be called the Green Scorpions, because at that stage, the Scorpions were the elite National Prosecuting Authority specialists, the Director of Public, the DPCR, the Hawks, or another Hawks. Yeah. So the elite unit of investigations of organized crime and so forth. And he just thought, well, that's a good name, the Scorpions. So let's call these guys the Green Scorpions. And the name stuck. Okay. And there's always been some poaching of rhino, because there's always been this demand in the east for rhino horn. And not as an aphrodisiac, as other people believe, but as a pain and fever remedy. So there was poaching up north. We'd never had poaching in the Eastern Cape. So while our numbers grew, and we've got mainly black rhino here in the Eastern Cape, while our numbers grew, there were other areas, other provinces in the country that were losing rhinos, particularly from about 2006, 2007, there was a spike in poaching for the East. And there are various reasons that have been given for that. But we were expected it to start in the Eastern Cape at some stage, because we saw rhino horns being stolen from game farms. There were even hits on museums. I mean, there were people that were held up with AK-47s at the Amatola Museum, for example, and tied up, and then the rhino poachers lassoed the trophies off the walls to get the horns. And even though we had intelligence before the time, people just thought this was a joke. They didn't think that anything's going to happen. And then in 2008, December 2008, I was having a braai at my house, burning some meat and having a beer, and around about 8:30 I got a phone call from Jaap Pienaar, who was my second in charge at the time and heading up operations for the Green Scorpions. And all he said to me, I remember the words were in Afrikaans, but he said, "Rhino down, rhinocer plat." That's all he said. And I said, oh, I can't say what I said, but but I was, okay, Jaap, where did it happen? And he said it happened at Shamwari. Now, Shamwari is one of the Eastern Cape's prime tourism destinations, safari destinations, an amazing private game reserve. And it was about 3 hours drive from where my house was. So I basically said to Jaap, we've got to get out there as quickly as possible. We've got a bit of music going. Okay.
That was Gino in the airways then.
Gino waving at us.
Gary, I think we've got images of this, what we're talking about now, Shamwari. If we can just put up the first couple of images there. Now this before we go any further, and I'm apologies for people at home who are eating their supper, but I think we need to remind ourselves of the barbarity of this pursuit. I mean, this is a victim of obviously rhino poaching. You can see this poor animal, it's had its horns removed. There's no care taken, its mutilated body. But the next image we can look at now, this is actually the Shamwari animal, isn't it?
That's actually the Shamwari animal. So that was the first rhino poaching incident in the Eastern Cape, December 2008. We went out the following morning, because obviously in the evening you can't do a crime scene like that, and Shamwari's got lions and all sorts of predators in that, which would be around the carcass.
Yeah.
So Jaap and I arrived at Shamwari as soon as the sun rose. We left early in the morning, like 3 o'clock, got there as the sun was rising, and there we saw this rhino lying. The first dead rhino that I'd seen, first poached rhino that I'd seen. Now it's a magnificent beast when it's alive. As you said, you see this animal. I've seen people crying when rhino have been captured and moved. The latest method where they sling them from a helicopter and they move them. And I've seen grown men just crying out of awe. And you must know, you arrive at a scene like that and you see this dead beast lying there, and this poor animal had been shot with AK-47, so it had been peppered with AK-47 rounds. I can't really describe the feeling other than it was really sobering, and you can even just see the guys walking around the carcass over there. The feeling that everyone has, it's a feeling of loss.
Is that a feeling you ever get used to?
I don't think you ever get used to that feeling, but you sort of you divorce yourself from that feeling in a way. You desensitize yourself. I think it's similar to what doctors do, and similar to what policemen do that investigate murders and so forth. You're never going to get over it. Some of those crime scenes, the animals have been horribly mutilated, and it's a terrible thing to see.
So how did that discovery of that on our doorstep here in the Eastern Cape? I mean, it was a problem that was happening elsewhere, of course. How did that shift the emphasis on your daily routine?
Well, immediately we started strategizing. We knew that there's going to be an onslaught on the Eastern Cape. There are now syndicates operating in the Eastern Cape. And that is where one of our big success stories comes in. We created a team which exists to this day of the various role players, the various enforcement agencies and top investigators. I mean, we've got like really good investigators currently from the Stop Theft and Endangered Species Unit. I mean, they drive most of the investigations now. But we had the hawks. We've got sand parks, the South African National Parks, the East Cape Parks and Tourism Agency. We've got them all on board and we strategize. There's a lot of intelligence gathering. So the aim obviously is to first catch these guys before they even kill a rhino. And we've done that successfully as a team for a number of years now. So touch wood, and it keeps on going that way. We lost rhino. We had a huge syndicate that was using M99 tranquilizers to dart rhino. Obviously, it was a simple method for them because it's quiet. They overdosed the rhino. The rhino lies there. It's still alive while it's alive, but it's quiet. They saw the horn off. The rhino bleeds to death most of the time. Horrific. It's horrific. And they were caught and they were prosecuted. There was a massive drive of public outcry. I remember then MEC Mabuyane and myself and a whole lot of officials marching down the streets of Grahamstown. Thousands of people in the, and I was toy-toying in the front there, and eventually the MEC said, no, you can't toy-toy. Hey, just stop toy, just walk normally. Yeah, it happened one Christmas when Jaap was still staying in the Koberga area, then what is then known as Port Elizabeth. He'd been working throughout the December time period, as we usually do, and he had a meeting that he'd attended in Overston, which is way up in the Free State border. He was coming home, looking forward to Christmas dinner with his family, his wife and his kids, and driving his Ford Cortina, and looking forward to home. He's getting pretty close to Port Elizabeth, going through the Alexandria area, and suddenly an oncoming vehicle is coming at him, and he sort of checks it out, and he sees, but this thing's got a cycad tied to its roof. And he looks again, this is one of the ways that cycads get transported. They get tied, they're heavy plants, and the spiky leaves get put down, they get tied up with rope. And this cycad has been tied with rope, and it's passing him. And now he's thinking of Christmas dinner and drinks there at home, and he sees the vehicle just pass him, and he's, oh, damn, I've got to do it. It's just one of those things. And his broadie's there, and he's changing gears, and he slaps the blue light on his roof. And he tells the story usually mixed in Afrikaans and English, so it's actually quite classic. But anyway, he's racing after this vehicle, and he's catching, but he's convinced the vehicle's actually trying to get away from him. And he's flashing, and eventually this vehicle stops, and he jumps out. And he's a burly guy, and he sort of starts running towards the vehicle. He's angry now. This vehicle's messed up his Christmas lunch and everything. And as he gets closer, he sees, but at the back, there's two kids, and their eyes are bigger than saucers. He says, "Soos parents," he says. And the lady in the front seat, he sees, is like seriously anxious. And the guy that gets out is nervous as heck. And he's about to like really give this guy hell when he notices that the plant is actually not a cycad. It's one of those plastic Christmas trees that looks like cycad. And it's all tied up. And this guy's white in the face. And Jaap's in uniform. And the guy says, "What did I do wrong?" And Jaap says, "No, you did nothing wrong. Just want to say, my name is Jaap Pinaar. I'm from Nature Conservation, and I just want to wish you and your family a happy Christmas." Shook his hand. Cheers, bye.
Brilliant, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That poor family, probably telling the tale to this. Why did he start with that?
No, wonderful nature conservators. So
thinking on his feet,
and such happy people racing after you to wish you a Merry Christmas.
No, as you said, you've got to work with a sense of humour, and I can imagine you're doing that.
Well, I was reserve manager of the Umtiza Nature Reserve, which is outside East London. It's about 20 kilometres outside East London. That was in the 1990s, and a lot of people have the habit of catching small animals and keeping them as pets, wild animals. It's certainly not something that is we don't actually allow. It's against the law.
Yeah.
And we certainly don't condone it, but it happens, and some of these animals actually make quite nice pets, especially when they're small. One thinks of monkeys, but usually at the end of the day, these things grow up, and then people want to get rid of them. And there was a case of a black-backed jackal, and a young boy had been given this jackal pup from, obviously, when it was very small. But he stayed in Cambridge, which is a suburb right slap bang in the middle of East London. And the mother phoned me one day and said that this jackal has now got too big. Its name's Dusty, and it lies on the boy's bed at the bottom of his bed. But it's just like chewing things up, and it's fighting with everything. And neighbours don't want it, and they've got to release it. Now, it's not policy just to release an animal, certainly these days. But in those days, we made a plan. I said to her, bring the jackal, we'll release it here. It's not really a forest animal, but at that stage there was quite a lot of open area around the Umtiza Nature Reserve, the forests. There were grasslands and so forth as well. So we released the animal there. Now, as I say, it's at least 20 kilometers from Cambridge. It wasn't 2 nights. I think it was the very next night. It may have been 2 nights later. But this jackal got back to Cambridge and jumped through the window of the house and went and lay at the foot of the bed of the little boy. So the mother phoned me again and said, hey, Dusty's back. I said, geez, that's impossible. No, he's back. I said, how can he find his way back? I mean, he didn't walk here. You drove me out of the car. He's never been in his life before, and he's back so quickly. Yeah, he's back. So we made another plan. We said, okay, bring Dusty. We'll take it to another reserve, which is a further 20 kilometers. So it's more than 40 kilometers from Cambridge. It's going through informal settlements. It's going through farmlands. It's going across a dam, and it's going all the way through to Fort Pato Nature Reserve. So there we released Dusty again and thought, okay, Dusty will now lead a happy life forever. It was probably 2 weeks later. If I go back in my diary, I'll probably find exactly how long it was. But it was quite a substantial time. I got a phone call again from the same mother. You won't believe it, Dusty's back. Dusty jumped through the window, onto the bed again, lying with my son. I said, man, can't you keep the thing? We'll make a plan. No, we cannot keep this jackal. It's got to go. So unfortunately, Dusty ended up in the East London Zoo, and he saw out his days in a zoo, pacing up and down. I went and saw him a couple of times, pacing up and down the fence line. It's a nice story, but it's also a horrible story. It paints a picture of what happens when you have wildlife as pets, and as I said, we certainly don't condone it. It's against the law in South Africa. You cannot have wildlife as a pet without a permit.
It just shows the incredible intellect, the instinct of wildlife, isn't it?
Absolutely amazing.
No, it's amazing.
I've always been a storyteller, and you know, it just sort of comes naturally. But some of the best storytellers are the black people of South Africa. So I've obviously listened to a lot of stories from the amaXhosa, but the Zulus, as Ian Player was always saying, they have this amazing ability to tell stories, and I think we are losing it. But there are more and more people that are trying to bring it back. You know, so there are story festivals and trying to bring out the importance of culture of the indigenous people of South Africa. And I think that's very important. So conservation shouldn't just be about the conservation of our plants and our animals. Sure, that's important, critically important, but it's also culture and history.
Of course it is. We've got a mention here from Rambotha. Hi Div, can you tell your viewers about the spike in other environmental issues, I presume due to COVID-19, such as the province-wide problem of, what's that?
Taxi hunts.
Taxi hunts. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that's come through there. So a taxi hunt is hunting with dogs. Now, hunting with dogs has become a huge problem in South Africa. Look, hunting with dogs is an age-old tradition. It's especially with young boys, and the problem with it, with the spike in illegal hunting that's taking place currently, and as Mr. Boyta is saying, especially after the COVID and during the COVID time period, is that a lot of it is not for subsistence hunting. It's not even boys having that sport, which is in any case illegal, but it is for gambling. So the taxi hunt is where taxis are hired to take greyhounds and various specialist hunting dogs to areas where there's a lot of game, and then betting takes place on these dogs nationwide. So there are a number of Facebook groups, gambling groups and so forth that bet on which dog is going to be the first one to take down an animal. It's completely indiscriminate hunting. They don't go for any specific target. It needn't be a springbok. It could be an extremely rare animal. It could be, quite often we see that aardvark have been taken down. And as I say, all sorts of animals, birds even, anything that the dog can get hold of gets torn apart, and then the money changes hands. That's a taxi hunt. During COVID, as soon as the roads opened and people were allowed to move around again, there were a lot of people that were bored. So there was a spike in illegal hunting, not only in taxi hunts, all sorts of other hunting as well, but particularly with dogs. And it's still a problem. We're trying to address it. again, education is important, awareness is important, but law enforcement is key to the whole thing as well. Now, there is a place for, I believe, for hunting in South Africa, in Africa. I mean, it's been an important part of the culture of Africans virtually forever.
Yeah.
Conservation, I believe, is wise use of your natural resources, but you've got to use it so that they are sustainably used for present and future generations. That, in fact, is a definition of conservation. And hunting is one means of using your natural resources. Obviously, one wants to do it in an ethical manner and a legal manner. But the debate around whether dogs should be used for hunting is one that can go on for a long time around a fire. There's provision made for it. If you have a permit, or if you hunt on a farm where you've got the landowner's written permission, and that farm has got a fence around it that adequately encloses the game that the farmer is looking after, and one of the management tools may be that form of hunting. Perhaps you'll have a hunt with people coming in with dogs, controlled manner once or twice a year. But the uncontrolled and illegal hunting with dogs is a massive problem. It's wiping out a lot of our wildlife.
Hey Div, great to hear more of your stories of life. Isn't it just? I mean, what a privilege. In the trenches, certainly on the trenches. On a more separate note, what do you think of, what's that say?
Extra limitals.
Extra limitals in Eastern Cape. I'm learning new lingo here.
Yeah, so thanks, Alistair, for that.
Thank you, Alistair.
Again, you guys are throwing questions over here that we should be debating deep into the night around a fire with a lot of beer, because the answers are so difficult, and there's so many different opinions. So extra limitals are alien species to the Eastern Cape.
Okay.
So you've got some animals that only occurred historically, we believe, in the Eastern Cape. There's a great amount of research by Skeed, for example, that shows what the historical incidence of Eastern Cape, and it's pretty accurate. It's based on all sorts of research and the diaries of hunters and explorers and missionaries and farmers and paintings in caves of the Bushmen or the San and so forth. And they don't believe that giraffe, for example, occurred in the Eastern Cape. Now, a number of game farms in the Eastern Cape have giraffe on. They have impala. Impala also didn't occur in the Eastern Cape. But they've done exceptionally well. Now, I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think that we should have giraffe and impala and these extra limitals that we know were not from the Eastern Cape in our national parks and in our provincial nature reserves. Because there we want to bring back and we want to show the Eastern Cape as it was. But I think when you've got an economic incentive, when you've got a game farm or a farm that's trying to make a living, I don't see that that's a bad thing. I personally don't see that that's any different to whether the person is farming with sheep or goats. So he or she, being the landowner, being the farmer, bringing in giraffes and bringing in impalas and all sorts of other things. I personally actually prefer to see them on the farm and to see goats and boerebokke eating all the spekboom and the thicket and all that type of thing. I'd rather see our indigenous animals, because they're indigenous to South Africa. So there I must make a distinction as well. If they're indigenous to South Africa, perhaps they would have moved over the years. We put fences in the way, we blocked their routes. Perhaps they would have moved, and they may just, there's been such a kudu migration over the years, even in my time, in the 40 years that I've been around. There are areas that have never had kudu, and kudu have moved through corridors and they've got to areas.
Okay.
Interestingly, the former Transkei, there's no records of kudu, ever, or rhino. So there's strange questions even around what is extralimital, what is alien to the Eastern Cape and what isn't, and would they have eventually arrived? So my point is, if it's from South Africa, and giraffe and impala are, then I'm not completely anti it. If it's now, if it's something that comes from overseas, fallow deer, red deer, that type of thing, mouflon, Barbary sheep, those sorts of things, I don't want to see them on our farms. That's just my opinion. I don't think that they, especially if they can get out and become a problem in the area, and I think there can be damage felt and so forth as well. But that's my personal opinion. We could, again, as I said to Alistair there, we can argue that one around a dry fire.
Yeah, part of where I'm going to start the book is that you're looking at the study by the likes of Skeed. Skeed makes claim of these are the original animals here. Now, one of the buzzwords, of course, is rewilding. It gets bandied around. From a purist point of view, if we're going to rewild the landscape, shouldn't we just bring those indigenous species back? But as Alistair said, there is a debate around animals like giraffe. But I think you've answered that. But it is, again, another sensitive issue, isn't it? Because we are remanaging or managing the environment now. You look at the work that they've done at Shamwari, for example. I mean, you can physically see this is agricultural land that is recovering in front of our eyes. What species we put in, isn't that man influencing it in a different way? I mean, how far do we go to manage that?
Yeah, and I mean, a place like Shamwari, we spoke with Adrian Gardner last night, and he was talking about when he released giraffe onto Shamwari many years ago. Obviously, it's a tourism draw card too. So whoever's managing that game reserve, let's not call it a nature reserve then, or private game reserve or game farm, decides through veld management and so forth, can I bring these animals in? Are they going to survive? If I've only got grassland, I can't bring a giraffe in. That happened at Mkambati, by the way. They did such poor assessments of what they should bring in. They brought in giraffes into an area that's mainly grassland. I mean, the giraffes, the only way they could eat was by leopard crawling. You know, and eventually, obviously, they died, and there were mass graves of all these species that should never have been there. But, you know, a farmer's not going to do that because he's going to lose financially, and eventually the veld's going to be trashed anyway. So all that gets taken into consideration in at the end of the day through a management plan.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of people will say they knew Ian Play. You know, it's great to say, oh, Ian Play was a friend of mine and so forth. You know, Ian, I knew Ian, but I will never say that Ian was a friend of mine. I knew Ian pretty well, and I knew Ian's wife. The reason why I knew them was because I was friends with Jim Feely, and Jim Feely was Ian Player's best buddy, or certainly one of his best buddies. And Jim and I worked together in the former Transcar for many, many years. So when we went to functions of this logo that I've got on here, and this badge over here, that's the Game Range Association of Africa. It's one of the organizations that Player established. So when we went to these functions, Ian Player was there, and I would go into his, very, very often into his rondavel or his cabin where he was with Jim Feely, and we'd talk and we'd have drinks and drink tea, or in the evenings drink beers and what have you, and discuss conservation. So I knew Ian. He did the foreword very kindly to my book on Mkambati and the Wild Coast, the one that John Costello and I brought out, and the first edition as well.
Show everyone that beautiful cover.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, so I remember that, I think we were at Letaba, if I remember correctly, but I remember in the lodge that Ian was at, when I asked him to do the foreword, I produced the manuscript, and he looked at it and he said, "Shit, I didn't know this was such a big document that I've got to go through, but I'll gladly do the foreword for you." And then he turned to me and he said, as he paged through, he said, "But this is all very good, but this is not your story.
Not your story.
This is not your story. I want you to tell your story." And he put the thing down and he said, "You have had the privilege of leading an adventurous life that many people will aspire to. And people want to know that story." He said, "Go back and start writing your story. Stories of the Eastern Cape and stories of the experiences that you've had." Because obviously Ian had done all that as well. And so I did. I produced those things and I sent them through to Ian, and I sent them through to Jim Feely, and they commented on them and so forth. But what an inspirational guy, you know, in the presence of Player. The first time I met Ian was at Mkuzi Game Reserve, and I was an aspiring member of the Game Rangers Association of Africa. And Ian was giving a talk to all the rangers. Now, at that stage, the GRA, as it's known, was 90% white. You know, it was the 1990s, very few black members. He went and stood in front of the audience. There'd been a whole lot of rumblings about how poorly we paid, and I mean, we were poorly paid in those, how poor the conditions are. The normal rumblings. Like in the evening, it was great. We'd have a lot of camaraderie and all that. But now, when the moaning session comes out, then we can be good moaners as well.
Yeah.
And Ian stood up front there and he started talking about the game rangers of Africa, the black rangers of Africa. Man, what a speaker that guy was. It's very seldom that I've been brought to tears by someone that's talking passionately about anything. And he was talking about conservation, about the black rangers out there, the African rangers, and how they've been at their posts. How at Garamba, that some of them had been working for more than 2 years without uniforms. And he'd been to them and he'd spoken with them, and they're still at their posts, and guys are dying. Even now, rangers, when you show the photograph there of Liverpool, There are hundreds of field rangers in Africa that are losing their lives. Virunga mountains. And Ian was talking about these guys, and it was an amazing. And the few times that I saw him speaking at a public event, he just had this ability to just draw people and impart to that knowledge and that passion. It was absolutely unbelievable. And when he's finished with that, he didn't come and sit back in the audience with us whiteys. He walked outside, and there under the thorn trees were the black rangers that he hadn't seen for years and years and years. And he went there, they'd come from all over the show, not only in Kuzi. And he went and he sat under a thorn tree. And he spent the entire day speaking Zulu to people that were not in our audience.
Amazing. Yeah.
And there I learned a lesson as well. So, always talk to everyone. Don't walk into a meeting and only go and greet the high-flying officials who are there and sort of ignore the field ranger or the chef or the people that are serving you.
Yeah.
Those guys, maybe one day just whether or not they get to a point that they get in a point of authority one day, the point of the matter is they're people and they're important.
Yeah.
And the message of conservation is just as important to be imparted to those people as what it is, maybe even more important than what it is to get to the top person, the so-called top person at a particular function. So an important lesson, and what a man. That's all I can say. He was just a real inspiration in all the things that he was doing for conservation.
By all accounts, people listen to Ian Players. People have listened to you today. I've been in your company now on several occasions, and today you've just enthralled people with your stories, with your humour, with your humility, your incredible experience. You're celebrating 40 years in this game now, Div. 40 years. So I tell you what,
quite a good batting average too.
I know. You've got to get to your half century. I mean, those 3 months at Rhodes University didn't do you bad, did they? And the irony is, of course, you returned very recently to get a PhD, a doctorate. So, and congratulations on that. What's next for Div de Villiers? We do not want to lose you from the Eastern Cape, and we certainly don't want to lose you from conservation. Where do you see your future? I mean, have you got many more years in your current role, for example?
No, I haven't got many more years in my current role. I think 40 is a good innings, but I don't want to leave conservation. I want to continue making a difference in the field. I think I can make a bigger difference out there now than what I can inside government. I would like to start working on projects. Look, I love the Eastern Cape, so that'll be my first choice if I can continue making a contribution here in the Eastern Cape. But any sort of conservation job, training is definitely going to be part of it. I'd like to impart with some of the knowledge and experience that I've built up over the years. So there will be some training. There will be maybe a few tours, taking a few people out to specific areas. I'd like to sit around the fire many more times with people that can make a difference. Maybe people that want to make a difference to the Eastern Cape and South Africa. I'd certainly like to have those opportunities. But who knows? Who knows where it's going to take me? I'm definitely not going to be a sports star anymore. I'm definitely not going to be a rock star. So.
Well, what was your saying today? You hope as many people turn up to Who Saw it the first time? What was that?
Yeah, this morning's breakfast. Yeah. I was a bit worried at one stage because we had a full hall of 150 people, and so my first target was just to break 5
Why
people.
5?
Because
Why 5?
When Supertramp, the rock band or the band Supertramp, when they had their first gig, or when they had their first concert, apparently only 5 people pitched up for that concert.
Well,
so I wanted to break that, and when I saw more than 5 people arrive this morning, I thought, great, I've beaten that.
And for the record, there was far more than 5 people. We had a good 100 or so come to see us this morning. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I hope people out there have enjoyed it. As you can see, I think we've set the bar high in terms of our first ever edition of Frontierland. You had to be my first guest. I mean, not only do you fill the screen in terms of your height and size, but in terms of your personality. You've got so much to share, Div, and for me, you encompass what's great about the Eastern Cape. Your humility, your experience, but you're making a difference here, and that's what I see so many people doing. So thank you for coming on. I think we can toast a good first show. I hope everybody out there has enjoyed it. Please get in touch with us. That's the main thing. If you'd like to follow up on anything we've talked about, just drop me a note in any of the socials. You can follow me on social media. or get in touch with Div, I can put you in touch with the great man here, and let's hope we can get some good work done, which is the main thing. I want to wish everybody a good evening. Thank you, Div.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you for supporting our first show. We'll be back in 3
much.
weeks' time. I've got an incredible lady called Francine Zana joining me, which will be fantastic. There she is there. And that will be on Thursday, the 10th of November, again, the same time. And from then on, we're hoping to do this fortnightly. So thank you again. If you've enjoyed Frontierland, please share this program. It's available for recording on YouTube and Facebook and all the usual channels. But thank you, Div. Thank you, Gary, for your great help as usual. He's the man that makes this happen. Have a good evening, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.